Congressman Scalise, welcome to Meet the Press.
Great to be on, Chuck.
I'm excited to be sitting here face-to-face interviewing you, considering everything you've been through this summer. Do you have a sense of normalcy yet?
I do. Just getting back into the job, things move fast around here. We just passed a budget. We had some other legislation on the floor through the week, and I was in the middle of that and talking to members about tax reform, which is something that we're working very aggressively on to cut tax rates and create jobs. That's what gets me excited. That's why I came to Congress. And, being able to get back into the job this quickly really did invigorate me. And just to be around the Capitol, I love doing this.
Do you look forward to the moment where you won't think about it every day?
It's not that there are bad thoughts that I think of, because there was so much good that came out of a bad act. I mean, the love, the support, the prayers from people all around the country. It touched me and my wife, Jennifer, in a way that maybe we never would have imagined, because it was so overwhelming and such a good sign of America that you don't see a lot of, but we felt it directly.
Look, I saw it in this town, you saw it in Washington. The good news is, in a time of crisis, this place rallies around each other. Yeah. The bad news is, it takes a time of crisis for everybody to rally around each other. I'm sure you heard more good feelings from Democrats than you'd ever heard before, and you're thinking to yourself, do you think to yourself, how could we have this mindset more often?
Yeah, in my job as Majority Whip, I'm primarily dealing with our Republican conference, and I talk to our members on a regular basis about the issues we're working on and looking down the road. But I've built good relationships with Democrats over the years, and when this happened, so many of them came to see me in the hospital. I mean, it was obviously Republicans, but it was Democrats too, and it was genuine. And you realize, the old saying that if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Maybe that's for people that don't know how to make friends, but there are genuine people up here that care. And yeah, sure, we disagree about issues sometimes, but it was like a family. It really, to see everybody come together and be so helpful and supportive of what I was going through was something I'll never forget.
Has your mission in your mind for why you came to Congress changed?
It's not that it changed. I maybe have a sharper focus, but I have a deeper perspective of just how important the work we're doing is, not just to our constituents in the country, but to our friends all around the world. I saw it directly. I had friends that world leaders I've met over the years that reached out personally, but then I had world leaders that I had never met that were reaching out and saying, we hope you get better. And it told me something deeper, that the work we do really does matter to everybody around the world, because America is the leader of the free world. We need to stand up a little taller every now and then, because we beat ourselves up a lot. But for people all around the world who just have a yearning for freedom, they look to us. And it's so important that we make sure that we rise to that challenge in the work we do.
Let's move to the big issue that's popped up this week. Obviously, the tragedy in Las Vegas. And there's been this debate about when to have the debate. Why do you make the case that it's too soon to have a gun control debate?
I would first say that we've had a gun control debate for a long time. I mean, you look at the presidential race, the NRA had never endorsed that early when they endorsed Donald Trump, because they knew there was a clear contrast. Donald Trump was supportive of gun rights, and Hillary Clinton wanted to limit gun rights. And so there was a contrast, and it was fought out, and ultimately the public had a decision to make, and that was one of the things that they weighed their vote on.
On this issue, we are so divided regionally. And we're so divided geographically on this issue that this one feels like it's very hard to find a compromise, because people that live in a certain community feel defiantly one way, and people that live in another community feel defiantly the other way. This one feels like we don't know how to bridge the divide.
It is one of those issues where you do have very polar opposite sides, where it's not, people real close to coming to a conclusion on a big issue. This is something where people are either on this side or that side when it comes to strong Second Amendment rights or gun control.
Let me ask about some of these limitations. First of all, how would you propose, do you feel as if this issue of mass shootings is a problem that the federal government has to figure out how to solve?
I think over the years, you've seen Congress address different components of it. One of the things that we've seen in some of the past shootings is that there were serious problems in the mental health community throughout our country. We didn't do a good job of tracking mental health, taking care of people that had mental health problems, and some of those people ended up going out and committing mass shootings. We actually came together and passed a major overhaul last year with the 21st Century Cures Act, which had included in it major revamping of our mental health system, with real money behind it too. And that was a bipartisan vote.
But there's been some things that weakened some aspects of the mental health when it came to the database, where there was a fight to allow people that have had, if you get disability benefits because of mental health issues, you can still pass a background check. Should that be the case?
Well, there were some people that we saw in that situation where they had not mental health issues, they had disability issues, and yet because they were on that list, they were getting denied gun rights, not because they had mental health issues, because they had disabilities. You shouldn't take away the rights of people to own a gun just because they have a disability but still have good mental health capacity.
But should we get to a point where mental health should be a part of the gun registration process?
Mental health already is a component of that. And again, we just created the Assistant Secretary of Mental Health in HHS. Just 2 months ago, the new secretary got put in place. So let's work and make sure that that gets implemented properly, because mental health is a serious problem in this country. And frankly, we've seen mental health issues bleed into mass violence. And so we've taken action to address it. It's a new law. Let's make sure it's implemented right so we can prevent some of these in the future.
Why do you think we do lead the world in these things? In gun deaths, we lead the world in these mass gun incidents. We lead the world in death by guns. We lead the world in how many guns per person we have in this country.
Well, if you look at
all of that related.
If you look at some of the places where you have bad gun violence, I mean, first of all, let's recognize the vast majority of gun violence and gun killings in this country are committed by people who broke the law to get the gun. But you go to a city like Chicago, some of the toughest gun laws in the country are in the city of Chicago, and yet they have the worst gun violence.
But they'll tell you, you just go in Gary, Indiana. So, I mean, you just go across state lines. You can have all the tough gun laws you want in the world, but if you cross state lines, I mean, that's why they argue for a federal.
I do think something that doesn't get focused on enough are the amount of people across the country who, over the course of a day or a week or a month, use guns to protect themselves against criminals. That happens all the time. It's not reported. So the only thing that gets reported are the tragedies, but it rarely gets reported when somebody actually uses their Second Amendment right with a gun to protect himself against a criminal.
There's been studies, though, that are still more gun deaths are not, most gun deaths are not self-defense.
But keep in mind that most of those gun deaths are committed by somebody who broke the law already to get a gun. You know, we've got a lot of laws on the books, and I'll tell you this, Chuck, one of the things we've seen a problem with is that a lot of the gun laws aren't being enforced. And I do think you've seen a change in this administration where they are getting more aggressive. But frankly, for years you saw a lax, actually a 25% reduction in going out and prosecuting people who break gun laws.
Part of this is funding the ATF. I mean,
they've had funding, but
there has been
the
a lot of funding withheld.
Right, but if the Justice Department
Fairness, do you acknowledge that?
If the Justice Department chooses whether or not they're going to prosecute, that's ultimately something that they make a decision on, and they were making bad decisions to not prosecute people who broke gun laws. You're seeing a change in that now, and that'll actually help stop some of these gun deaths in the future.
Let me ask you this philosophically. Is there a limit? Do you believe that is the right to bear arms unlimited, or is there a limit?
Look, the Second Amendment really predates the Bill of Rights. Our founding fathers believed strongly in gun rights for citizens. Frankly, they thought it was an assumed right. They didn't put it in the Constitution because they didn't think it would ever be in jeopardy, but ultimately you saw attempts later on to take away gun rights, so they said it's so important, we're going to make it one of the 10 Bill of Rights constitutional changes. And so it is a long history in our country to make sure that you protect the rights of citizens to bear arms.
But is it unlimited?
It is. I mean, you've
seen
limits.
You really believe it's unlimited?
You've seen limits put in place, Chuck. You've seen limits that are already in place. And again, you've seen laws that are on the books. And those laws are there for a reason. Well, you're right in the sense that there are already limits on the gun ownership. But frankly, let's go out and enforce those laws. Don't try to put new laws in place that don't fix these problems. They only make it harder for law-abiding citizens to own a gun.
So you do agree there should be some limitations?
Well, obviously, there are limits in law.
But you said they're in law.
Ownership.
Would you have supported those limits at the time?
Oh, I'm sure I would have supported some of them, but probably might have opposed others. But in the end, you have laws that are on the books that aren't being enforced. Go out and focus on enforcing those laws.
Do you agree with the automatic weapons ban?
If you look at, again, Some of the weapons that they included in there aren't really automatic weapons, but those laws are on the books too. And again, you haven't seen a decrease in gun violence with those laws on the books. So go and enforce the laws that are there.
All right, what do you make of this bump stock, of this accessory that takes a semi-automatic weapon and turns it into virtually an automatic weapon?
If you talk to anybody about a week ago, most people, including myself, didn't even know what a bump stock was. So
me too.
Now
Me
we're
included.
finding out about it. And
Right.
again, there are people that want to rush to judgment. They've got a bill written already. And I mean, look, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi already said she wants it to be a slippery slope. She doesn't want to stop at bump stocks. They want to go out and limit the rights of gun owners. And so I do think it's a little bit early for people to say they know what to do to fix this problem. I know there are people that are asking the ATF to go back and review their 2010 decision.
Do you think they should?
To authorize it. And I think they should, and they are. You know, you've seen.
But you're not ready to codify it into law.
Well, again, I mean, a week ago, most people didn't know, few people, but most people didn't know what a bump stock was. So to think that we're now all experts and know how to write some, panacea law, it's fallacy. You know, let's focus on the facts. Let's get the facts, and let's go focus on some of the problems. And frankly, we've done some of that already.
Is there a point where somebody's right to bear arms infringes on somebody else's right to be safe and secure at a country music concert?
Absolutely. If they break the law and take away your rights, you've got a right to be protected in your home and when you're out in public. And if you're abiding by the law, nobody has the right, whether it's a gun or a hammer or a knife, to go and deny your rights by trying to attack you.
We're learning that this guy stockpiled a lot of weapons, a lot over the last year. We don't necessarily monitor that type of sales. I know there's always been some concerns about that. Had we been monitoring, he might have gotten a check-in from the FBI or ATF going, what are you up to? And maybe that might have intervened. Is that something you could imagine ever supporting the idea that there is a limit on how many guns you buy in a year, in a month, in a week?
I think it's dangerous for the concept that the federal government would have some kind of list of who has guns and what they have. Because you've seen that, by the way, in totalitarian countries where they use that list to go and take guns from people.
I get that argument.
But it's really happened. Frankly, go back to after Katrina. We saw law enforcement going door to door in the city of New Orleans, taking guns from law-abiding citizens. That happened in the United States of America in 2005. It should have never happened. We put laws on the books to stop government from taking guns, but government and other governments we've seen over history have used those lists to take guns away from law-abiding citizens.
Do you think we have too many guns on the streets?
I think we have people that are out there breaking laws, and again, even
But
if
we
they
have too
break a
many
law to get a
guns.
gun.
I understand that, but have we just got too many guns in the same way we have too many opioids? It's just where it's just overwhelming the ability to monitor this.
The problem is not that there are too many guns, is that there are people that will go out and break the law, whether it's a gun or some other weapon or a bomb. There's no excuse for breaking the law. There's no excuse for using any kind of weapon to try to take the life of an innocent person.
All right, I want to move to what I think is going to be your toughest job coming back as whip, tax reform. You were a deficit hawk. There's a lot of deficit hawks in here, but this is going to blow a hole in the deficit, the size of which we can debate. Are you comfortable supporting something that's going to increase the deficit?
Well, first of all, if you start with a different premise, and that is, what do we need to do to get our economy moving again? I don't think there's anything we can do that would be more important to get our economy moving again and creating jobs than to lower tax rates for families. And one thing that's left out of this equation a lot is the power of economic growth. When we bring tens of thousands of jobs back to America, we've seen all these companies moving jobs overseas. We've complained about it, but the reason they're doing it is because our tax rates are too high and we're not competitive. We're the highest corporate rate in the world. Let's lower those rates. Small businesses.
How do you
families
guarantee,
should
though,
have
that these
lower rates, too.
corporations aren't going to just hand that money to shareholders, which many shareholders will demand, and not put it to job creation? I mean, the history of this, and studies say corporations, when they get a windfall like this, they give it to shareholders first. They don't use it to create jobs.
I've talked to the heads of a lot of these companies, and the first thing they'll tell you is they didn't want to move those jobs overseas in the first place. To be competitive with the companies in other countries they were competing against, they had to do it, otherwise they would have gone under. They will bring those jobs back, and they said in the tens of thousands. And these are good high-paying jobs, by the way, Chuck, that we need in our economy.
How do you guarantee that these companies will actually bring these jobs back. In 2004 we had an attempt that they were supposed to do that when they were going to use it to create jobs. It didn't happen.
Well, first of all, what you're going to see is trillions of dollars coming back into America. That's a good thing. Where is it going to go? It's going to go all throughout our economy. Absolutely, jobs will be created from that. Other people are going to be seeing the benefits of that too, from middle-class, blue-collar families. They're going to see more dollars in their paycheck. That's a good thing.
Is anybody going to have their taxes raised?
No, not under our plan.
Everybody's tax bill will go down.
You're going to see
you
all
really
the
believe
rates
all rates
go down,
including the wealthy, the poor, everybody.
All the rates are going to go down. The death tax will be completely repealed, by the way. Probably one of the most immoral taxes on the books.
What do you say to folks that say though that the wealthy is going to get the lion's share of the benefit of this tax reform?
I think what you're going to see is a rebuilding of the middle class like we've never seen before. One of the biggest
But you
gaps.
don't dispute that the wealthy is going to get the biggest.
Well, first of all, if you
benefit
cut rates for everybody, that means everybody gets more dollars in their pocket. More people see money in their pockets. The people who are going to benefit the most are going to be the middle class, because if you look over the last 10 years, the middle class has evaporated. That means lower income for a lot of people that haven't seen pay raises in a long time. Let's turn that around. We can do it. The most important thing we can do to get that going, to get the economy going, to create jobs and rebuild the middle class is tax reform, and we're going to get it done this year.
And how much is going to be added to the deficit?
Once you see the economic growth that comes with it, we have to control spending, first of all, because when more money comes in, you've seen this in previous tax cuts. You can go back to the big tax reform in 1986, which, by the way, is the last time we've reformed our tax code. You saw the federal government get more money. They ended up having deficits because they spent even more than they were getting in. The key is going to be control spending. You'll see the economy take off, which means more money comes into Washington, but then more money is going to be in the pockets of families.
How are we going to be able to control spending? The president himself went down to Puerto Rico and said, hey, you guys are busting our budget. And now he's proposing a giant tax cut. That doesn't seem like checkbook, actually balancing your checkbook.
Just this past week, the House passed a budget. It was a partisan vote, but it was a budget that actually gets back to balance. It shows you how you can balance the federal budget again. We put together the votes to pass that bill. We got 219. We needed 215, so we ran up the score, Chuck. But,
barely.
but it shows you that there is the will and a majority in this House to actually get back to a balanced federal budget, and we just voted to show you how to do it. And that means getting the economy moving again, creating jobs, and tax reform is a big part of it.
All right, two political questions. I've learned from your staff that it was about the 1st of August that your wife let you have your cell phone back, which meant you were probably ready to go, chomping at the bit. What did you think when the president cut a deal with Chuck and Nancy? What was your initial reaction when you heard about this?
Well, I was watching.
Do you think it would have happened if you were in the room?
I was watching, and I'll tell you that the thing that I think led to it the most was the Senate failing to pass the health care reform bill. We passed it in the House. I worked very closely on it, and it was a very thin margin, and it was hard to put together, but we put that coalition together. And then the Senate came close, but they failed. They fell short. And I think at that point the president looked and said, if the Senate Republicans aren't going to be able to move an agenda, maybe I'll look around.
So you don't think the president's lost faith in House Republicans?
No.
He's only lost faith in...
No, we have a very close relationship. I enjoy working with this president. President Trump actually is focused on getting the economy moving again and following through on the promises he made during the campaign, which to me is very refreshing. So I enjoy working with him. I want to move this agenda forward, and it starts front and center right now with tax reform.
All right, final question. Vice President's Chief of Staff was caught on an audio tape earlier this week, saying that GOP voters and donors might have to purge Republican lawmakers who aren't supportive of the president's agenda. And he even said, look, if we end up in the minority, I'd rather have a minority where everybody's on the same page. Do you think you'd be House Majority Whip if you went about this kind of purge?
Well, I don't agree with that, first of all, and maybe he got a little overzealous, but at the end of the day, you've seen Vice President Pence working very closely with us in the House on moving our agenda forward. President Trump has been working closely and has helped us tremendously at passing health care reform out of the House. He's working closely on tax reform. But Vice President Pence is a man of the House. I served 5 years with him here in the House, and he enjoys coming back. He's got great relationships.
But this must not help you with some members that you're trying to get to vote for you, whether they're in Pennsylvania, New York, or they may have some tough races. Does this kind of talk help?
In the end, those kind of comments don't impact what's happening on the House floor. We're fighting hard to keep our majority, and I think people know what's at stake. When you look at Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, I think that more than anything crystallizes to people what the difference between a Republican and a Democrat majority is. And again, when you see Nancy Pelosi making those comments about wanting more gun control, it shows what kind of difference there is between a Republican and Democrat House.
You think if you don't get tax reform, you guys deserve to lose the House?
I think we need to get it done, and in my view, failure is not an option. So I don't look at what would happen if we fail. I work every day to make sure we pass it to deliver for the American people.
But you understand if voters punish you for it.
We've got to deliver for the American people. You look at, again, the middle class has evaporated over the last few years. We've got to rebuild it by creating jobs. Tax reform does it. We've got to get it done.
Steve Scalise, it's good to have you back,
Chuck,
sir.
great to be with you.
All right, appreciate it.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.